Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first session of the ELTT online seminar. Dear listeners, dear followers in our YouTube channel, on our Google Plus Hangout group, this is the first ELTT webinar run by the sustainability team at the University of Zurich, Switzerland. My name is Clemens. I will moderate this session. And I'm very proud to welcome our two distinguished guests in this online panel. On the one side, Dr. Alexander Leicht, and on the other side, Professor Ibrahim Abuleish from Egypt. The ELTT program is a one-year blended learning professional training program targeting actually people at higher education institutions. And we are focusing to enable those university educators to take leadership in transforming teaching for sustainable development at their institutions. ELTT is the abbreviation for enabling leadership for transformational teaching and learning for sustainable development. And at the University of Zurich, we have tried to launch this program together with partners to enable university educators for transforming their practices in education and teaching at universities. The whole ELTT program entails 8 open source webinars. This one is the first of it, and handouts, as well as 8 workshops at the University of Zurich. And the open source webinars and the handouts, I say they are open source, so they will be distributed. They can be watched and followed all over the world. And also the handouts will be able to use all over the world for workshops at universities. The program runs in international partnership with international organizations, as such the Copernicus Alliance, which is the European network on higher education for sustainable development. It is the International Association of Universities as a global university network, also striving for sustainability in higher education and for higher education development as such. Then the RCE Service Center at United Nations University, the Institute for the Advanced Studies for Sustainability at UNU, and the Global University Partnership for Environment and Sustainability run by UNEP. So those are our international collaborations, and through those networks we'd like to actually distribute and disseminate our webinars and the handouts to the global community of people who'd like to strive towards sustainability in higher education. The ELTT program would not be possible without some funding, and so it is funded by the Sustainable Universities Program, which is an initiative by the Swiss Academy of Sciences and the Mercator Stiftung. So today, the first ELTT webinar actually focuses on the impact and relevance of global programs for sustainable development and education for sustainable development especially, and how these global programs actually also impact local institutions, like higher education institutions at the local scale, but all over the world. So just a week ago, actually, in end of September 2015, the UN General Assembly has officially accepted the Agenda 2030, including the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, as a follow-up also of the Millennium Development Goals. And that have been, those Sustainable Development Goals have actually been developed through a very participative process, which started at the Rio+20 Summit in Rio de Janeiro 2012. And in 2014, in November, the UNESCO took balance of 10 years UN Decade on Education for Sustainable Development. This UN Decade ran from 2005 up to the end of 2014 and has launched in November in Aichi, Nagoya, the Global Action Program on Education for Sustainable Development. So those are 2 global partnership programs initiated by UN and UNESCO, so to support sustainable development in a society globally, as well as really focusing also on education for sustainable development and supporting education for sustainable development. So in this ELTT webinar, actually, we'd now like to discuss the relevance and opportunities of those global programs, and especially for higher education institutions, as you are probably watching from. So the main questions will be, what is actually the role of higher education institutions in global ambitions towards sustainable development, as like those programs? What do specific goals of the SDGs and the Global Action Program mean for higher education institutions? And how can local experience and knowledge from science and practice actually find influence at a global scale? As live followers, you are also invited to bring in your questions through the ELTT LinkedIn discussion group. To discuss those questions, actually, we have invited two, as said, very distinguished guests in the ELTT webinar. And I'm very glad to welcome our two guests. On the one side, Dr. Alexander Leicht, Director of the ESD program, UNESCO in Paris. He has led the UN Decade on ESD to wide implementation of ESD international policies, as well as thousands of initiatives also globally that came up through this UN Decade on Education for Sustainable Development. Initiatives that have launched at local scale by NGOs and raised awareness on sustainability through formal and non-formal educational practices. Now, Dr. Leicht is actually also leading the process of implementation of the Global Action Program on ESD at UNESCO in Paris headquarters, and the main aim of mainstreaming ESD into policy and practice globally at UNESCO. On the other side, we have Professor Dr. Ibrahim Abuleish in Cairo, Egypt. He's the founder and president of the Heliopolis University for Sustainable Development, which is a university, a young university located in Cairo, Egypt. Since the 70s, actually, Professor Abuleish is promoting sustainability through growing business initiatives in organic food, cotton, and pharmaceutical product development, closely connected all of those to social initiatives like healthcare, education, culture, and art. For his ambitions, Professor Abuleish has also won the Alternative Nobel Prize and many other awards globally. So Heliopolis University is fully dedicated to enable students actually and researchers to build competencies and innovations for sustainable development. So this was just a short introduction to our two distinguished guests and speakers on our panel. And now actually I'd like to start our discussion with the first question to Professor to Dr. Alexander Leicht.